you've obviously been very, very outspoken this week and just sort of this whole political season about the direction of the Republican Party. Is this sort of something new for you? Does this moment represent something different than the past, or is this sort of Pete King being Pete King?
I guess it's Pete King being Pete King. Believe it or not, I don't look for these things. I'm not the kind of guy who wakes up in the morning and looks for a fight. But if one comes along, I figure, you only go through life once. You might as well stand up for what you believe in. No, I could go back. I had a number of, first of all, I never get in fights with people who are weaker than I am. I mean, I'm not looking for, to bully anybody around. But when Newt Gingrich was riding high in the mid-90s, I spoke out against him. I had some clashes with Tom DeLay, even though we became good friends. I supported Bill Clinton during the impeachment because I thought Republicans was wrong to impeach a president for what he was being charged with. Trying to think, I mean, certainly with Sandy, I spoke out on that. And what does bother me, this whole Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, especially Ted Cruz wing of the party, I don't consider these guys conservatives. I think the party is going in an isolationist trend. It's appealing to the lowest common denominator in many ways. And this whole threat of defunding the government, to me, is not conservative at all. I'm as opposed to Obamacare as anyone. But to me, if a bill passes both houses of Congress, president signs it, a Supreme Court upholds it, and a national election ratifies it, if we're going to repeal it, we should do it the same way it was passed. We should elect more Republicans, pass a repeal in both houses of Congress, and have a Republican president sign it. You don't hold a gun to the government and say we're going to defund the government if that we're going to shut down the government unless Obamacare is defunded.
And what would you say to the argument that you claim that that's not conservative, that your view of things is conservative and is more consistent with Republican traditions? What would you say to the idea that you're sort of the outlier in the party at this point? A guy who's winning a district that bears very little resemblance to where most folks in the Republican conference come from.
I would say my district bears much more resemblance to the country at large, certainly. And President Obama did carry my district, but I won it by, I don't know, 15, 16 points, whatever it was, 18 points. I held these same views. I would hold them no matter what district I was in. I supported Barry Goldwater. I was at rallies for Barry Goldwater 50 years ago. So, my conservative values are there. And I'm saying that as conservatives, we're not supposed to have an applause meter. Just because a law is unpopular at one time doesn't mean you can threaten to shut the government down, that somehow we're representing the voice of the people. The idea of the Constitution, these guys who always carry the Constitution around in their pocket, is that we do have all of these structures in place for a reason. We can't just repeal a law overnight or can't just change a law overnight. You have to go through a whole process. We don't want to have government, again, run by applause meter. It's not like the old TV show Queen for a Day. It's very difficult to pass a law, and it should be difficult to repeal it. And you do it at the election. At elections, that's how you do it, by electing people, not by saying the polls show it's unpopular. Now, by next month, a poll shows that Obamacare is popular. Does that mean that we end up endorsing it? Your principle is supposed to last whether or not something is popular or unpopular.
What do you think it would take for a Republican presidential candidate to win your district?
I would say somebody who is certainly right of center, is someone like Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan carried Suffolk County, and 80% of my district is in Suffolk County now. 75 to 80% is in Suffolk County. Carried it by 100,000. I think it was the largest majority of anywhere in the country. And it would basically be right of center Republicans and Reagan Democrats, people who belong to building trade unions, cops, firefighters, middle income families who are fighting to get ahead, but also realize that life isn't that simple. That's why I think somehow we live in different, maybe we do live in different worlds. These guys from the Ted Cruz wing live in their own echo chamber. I was home all weekend. All summer. I don't take vacations. I was around the whole month of August. And not so much at political events, but coffee shops, bagel shops, donut shops, going to Little League games, just hanging out. And nobody came to me and said we have to defund Obamacare. If I asked them if they're for Obamacare, they'd say no. But they wouldn't say shut the government down because of Obamacare. What people were asking me about was Syria. That was a real issue. And I had many, many people ask me about Syria. Some were for the attacking, others were not, others just had questions. How does this tie into 9/11? Should we take, because we had big losses on 9/11. We come down here in September. I thought the big issue would be Syria. We go to our first conference. It was maybe 10 seconds of discussion on Syria. Everything else was these guys standing up saying everywhere they went all summer, people said you have to defund Obamacare. that term wasn't even around earlier in the summer. So somehow in their echo chambers of moral self-righteousness that Ted Cruz was orchestrating, they were hearing about defund Obamacare, and you had these guys making commitments at town hall meetings they were going to defund Obamacare no matter what.
But I guess, I mean, I don't mean to sort of repeat the question, but
Sure.
If everybody else has that experience from their districts and you have a district that has a more direct experience with 9/11 than most others in the country, is probably concerned about issues that are relevant to a big metropolitan area, which is different from a lot of Republican members of Congress. I guess the comparison that somebody made to me is that Congressman King is sort of like a Republican Zell Miller at this point, that the party has just moved away from his experience and the constituency. Right?
No, I say these guys have moved away because, again, if they're talking about the voice of the people, when you see a poll coming out that's 77 to 21, people are against the government being shut down over defunding Obamacare. When you see polling showing that even Tea Party people say we should not defund, that we should not shut the government down because of Obamacare, that to me is, again, 77% say we should not shut the government down. So who's speaking for the American people? The Ted Cruz people or me? I'm on the side of the 77%. They're on the side of the 21. I don't know where the other two are. I guess they didn't have an opinion. But I mean, so it's because of people like that we can't win national elections.
Have you heard from the White House at all? Any Democrats back in New York asking you to keep up the fight?
Well, I have Democratic friends in New York, but I also have Republican friends. And in fact, I would say almost everybody loves me.
But you haven't gotten a call from Governor Cuomo or...
No, but actually, Governor Cuomo was quoted in a column on a story the other day in New York saying that I'm one of the people who gets it. So no,
I saw George Clooney was quoted saying.
What's that?
I saw George Clooney was quoted saying.
Yeah, well, I think the reason he's so familiar with me is that I think at airports women are always saying, "Are you Pete King?" So he had to figure out who I was, and that's why it was on his mind. No, I mean, listen, I'm not. Probably it's the only issue George Clooney and I would agree on. I appreciate him saying that. I mean, this is a serious issue, and. But as you mentioned, Andrew Cuomo, he and I have a good relationship. Ed Koch and I have a good relationship. But it's in New York we're able to deal better. And let me stress on this too. I've again voted to repeal Obamacare 42 times. I've run every time I run with a conservative party endorsement. I've been honored by the state conservative party, the local conservative parties, both in Nassau and Suffolk County, Queens County. So this to me is this is a faction of the party. It's a again, when you have Tom Coburn saying it's a bad idea, Karl Rove saying it's a bad idea, the Wall Street Journal saying it's a bad idea, George Will saying it's a bad idea, we can go down the list, and then also Jeb Bush, Mitt Romney. These guys are the outliers. Maybe because of some gerrymandering, they have these districts where they feel powerful, but it's again, they are definitely out of touch, and they're going to ruin the Republican Party.
And what happens to you in 2016 if you end up with a presidential nominee who comes from that wing of the party?
It depends on who it is. I mean, sometimes party loyalty can demand too much, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen. That's one of the reasons I'm speaking out also, is so that the average person out there does not think that Ted Cruz is the Republican Party or Rand Paul is the Republican Party.
So if you've got a presidential nominee, Rand Paul, I know you're going to say you don't want to do hypotheticals, but if you've got a presidential nominee, Rand Paul, could we see you speak out for a Hillary Clinton or a Democrat like that?
No, I don't think I would be speaking out against the party, but you wouldn't hear me saying much in favor either.
Sure. And how much longer can you see yourself enjoying being in the House under these circumstances?
Oh, I enjoy it. I enjoy just the standing up for what you believe in, able to get things done. I mean, this stuff doesn't bother me personally. I mean, I don't like a lot of these guys, the way they act and all that, but I mean, that's, life is unfair, so what are you going to do? Sure. You just go through it and, what else would I do?
And what's you could play golf or go make a lot of money somewhere. Yeah. What's your best guess right now on how this all gets resolved?
Unless it's resolved soon, I think it's going to be later rather than sooner. I mean, unless it's done in the next day or two, I can see it going on for a few weeks. It's going to end up merging with the debt ceiling. I think the Speaker probably feels that until the Tea Party runs out of steam, or until the Cruz Republicans, until it starts to hurt them, it's going to be hard to do much here. And now the president's going to be going to Asia. I don't know if that, to me, he should be, by the way, I'm being very critical of Republicans. I'm extremely critical of the president for not being engaged. I can't imagine Franklin Roosevelt or Teddy Roosevelt or Jack Kennedy, Ronald Reagan sitting on the sidelines while their government was shut down.
This notion that Congress doesn't get New York, or the majority doesn't get New York, or the country doesn't get New York, just how much is that your sense of what's driving things?
There's definitely some of that. That was certainly true with Sandy. I mean, I've been here 21 years now, and there was never any hesitation or even debate about providing emergency relief, whether it was Katrina and go back to all those different hurricanes and storms. And suddenly with New York, there was this whole implication that there was pork and it was being wasted. And it's interesting that you have Colorado, all the Republicans from Colorado voted against the Sandy aid, and now they're tapping into the Sandy fund for the flooding in Colorado. And the reason they're giving for it is that there was so much pork in the Sandy bill, including Alaska fisheries. Well, there wasn't. That was all a myth that was made up. Yeah, there's a different standard applied, and politically one of the problems is that Republicans feel that no matter what they do, they're never going to carry New York. Democrats feel no matter what they do, they can't lose New York. So, but Republicans especially know how to find New York when they raise funds, and that's where they go for their fundraisers.
But can you fault them for that impression that, like the mayor's race right now, Joe Lhota doesn't have a shot in that race, does he?
Oh, Joe has a shot. I mean, it's going to be tough, but he's a good candidate. No, I mean, first of all, they've written off New York. I mean, we had at one time, when I first came here, we had about 13 congressmen from New York. Then you had Newt come in, and there was this whole anti-New York mentality that was developing, and it just drove New Yorkers away from the Republican Party too. So no, I think, listen, it's going to be hard to carry New York statewide. We can certainly make more inroads in congressional races, and I think even as far as the statewide, we could run better races. But also, New York is sort of a metaphor for them. I mean, there's a lot of groups in New York that around the country, for instance, Ohio would be similar. We have building trade unions. There's a big building trade constituency in Ohio and Pennsylvania, for instance. And I think that a blue-collar conservative could carry Pennsylvania for president, could carry Ohio for president. But we alienate those groups.
So the point is not carry New York, it's carry the kinds of people in New York that win you an
election. Yeah, a lot of the people could, and you would also pick up more congressional seats.
Right. You mentioned Newt. Is it surreal at all to turn on CNN and see him sort of cheerleading another shutdown at this point?
Who's that?
Newt.
Yeah, Newt. The last shutdown, I didn't think it was going to work at the time. It was probably not the right thing to do. But having said that, that was if there's such a thing as a legitimate shutdown, that was it. In that you had two competing budgets in effect, and there was a real debate, an honest debate going on, and between Republicans and Bill Clinton. It was the first time we had Congress in 40 years, and at least that was over substantive arguments. We weren't trying to repeal Clinton's achievements or lack of achievements, and that was. And if Newt had handled himself better, unfortunately, he made himself the center of that. And that's one of the reasons we lost in that. Because, I mean, I did know several people in the White House who said a number of times they were close to making more concessions than they did. It became very personal around Newt, the complaining about Air Force One and just putting himself out front. So that one, there was more of a chance of it working. But if that didn't work, this certainly isn't going to work. And it should have known that. It was different, too, because this is targeted at President Obama and his health care plan. So it became really just like an obsession of going after one person to prove a point. It's basically to undo an election.
You've been generous with your time, but
it's okay.
Just when do you think some of your colleagues who are either more moderate or from districts more like yours are going to start taking the votes that you're taking right now to try and bring this to an end?
Again, I would hope sooner rather than later. And, we talk about New York, for instance, and, if I end up running for president, I may be an opponent of Chris Christie. But having said that, Chris Christie is showing something. I mean, here's a guy who is very conservative, but he also doesn't antagonize. He has the support of building trade unions. He appeals to blue-collar people, independent voters. And, New Jersey has been a blue state in presidential races, I guess, since Ronald Reagan. Maybe Bush in 88, but I think probably Reagan in 84 may have been the last time we carried it, and yet Christie's going to get 60-something% of the vote in New Jersey, which does show you can really cut into the independent votes. You can probably win the independent vote, and you can cut into the blue-collar ethnic Democrats.
Is he someone you have a good relationship with, or is he someone you've talked to during all this?
Not during this. Chris Christie and I have had a roller coaster relationship. Right now, the roller coaster is at the top of the hill, so we're doing fine. Now, we had a few. I actually traveled to Trenton in 2010, urged him to run for president, and so we had a good 2-hour meeting at that time. Then we had a disagreement over the NYPD going into New Jersey. That got pretty heated. We had a few very heated phone conversations. We were sort of matching each other with high school curses, one of those type things. But actually, then afterwards, we've had a good handshake, we get along, and then we work very closely together during the whole Sandy aid. So I guess what I'm saying is the fact that you can have a fight with a guy, or 2 fights with a guy, I guess we've had, and still be friends and still work together, shows it's a good relationship. So I'm only pointing out the problems to show that it's a real relationship, because politicians walk around with their arms around each other saying how much they love their colleague, like guys always did to me till they screwed me on Sandy. So I mean, you know, I wouldn't expect, if Chris Christie and I ever had a difference, it would be face to face. It wouldn't be guys slap me on the back and tell me how great I am. And then we'd have the difference, and the next day we'd probably go out. No, we could have beer together.
Right. Was there anything you're dying to talk about that people aren't asking you?
No, just I guess, I mean, I don't have a pattern of fighting with people, but there have been various key points along the way which I have stood up for what I think is normal, you know, Republican politics. And also, even though, like, you tell me about all these members of Congress, is my view of the world much more narrow than theirs, or am I living in my own world? Again, when you see virtually every national contender either being silent or saying that this should be worked out and the government should not shut down, I would say that it shows the majority is on my side, not theirs. They just happen to have a majority, not even a majority, they're able to control a majority in the House right now.
Well, and just to be clear, I wouldn't suggest that you have a narrow view of the world. It just,
well, no, I mean,
it just seems like the trend in Congress.
No, I didn't mean that as personally. I'm just trying
sure.
to say that just because these guys are out there and they're so convinced that they're right and all that, the fact is there must be a reason why the guys who want to run for president are saying we shouldn't shut down the government, right. And the people who've been around a while say we shouldn't shut down the government, and people who are looking at this globally, not just in their own primary constituency in red states or red districts. If you're looking at this statewide, if you're looking at this nationwide, what they're doing is just it's a pathway to disaster.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
It was all off the record, by the way.